Okay, wonderful. So thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, Joy. And I want to thank the organizers, the educators, the administrators, and parents whose work and efforts have brought us here today together. It is my great honor. And I also want to acknowledge everybody online. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be looking, but I know you're out there. It is my great honor to help kick off the 12th annual community-based Heritage Language School Conference. Today, I want to talk a little bit about how universities and community schools can bridge resources and relationships to strengthen and sustain the vibrancy of community-based heritage language programs. But before I do, I want to share a quick story from my own journey as a heritage language student, one that began more than 50 years ago. I know you're doing the math right now. Had I had a crystal ball back then, and I knew that I would spend my career studying heritage language maintenance and development, my story would have gone very differently. But I did not. And unfortunately, my story mirrors a lot of the thousands of other heritage language speakers that we have. And when I was 5, my parents and I moved from Seoul, Korea to Los Angeles, California. I had just completed kindergarten and I was just learning how to read and write. My father was adamant that we keep our Korean roots. We ate Korean food at home. We spoke Korean every single weekend. We would call our extended families overseas. Remember those days when you had to yell into the phone? But once I started school and our family started gaining financial stability, we started moving further into the suburbs of Southern California. And then my parents started noticing that my English was more frequent in the home, and my conversations in Korean became shorter and shorter. Sounds familiar, huh? Well, my English was replacing my Korean rather than growing alongside it. My father was desperate to slow this slide. So every Saturday morning, yes, every single Saturday morning, my father would round me and all the neighborhood kids up and drive us an hour each way to downtown Los Angeles so that we can attend the Namgaju School, which was the biggest Korean language school back then. Now I think that school has turned into an institute and has 11 campuses throughout Southern California. But back then, that was that one school. So that meant a 2-hour ride just for Korean school. For us, that meant no Saturday morning cartoons, no birthday parties, no AYSO soccer, which were the things that mattered to us back then. So as you can imagine, my father was not a very popular person in our neighborhood. And we all kept asking, why do we have to do this? We're Americans. And my father kept saying, language is power. Back then, we didn't understand what that meant. So at school, we were met with rows of desks, serious teachers who kept making us memorize these dialogues, kind of random dialogues and vocabulary words from textbooks that were donated by the Korean consulate back then. So I still remember the first dialogue in one of the textbooks where I was having to practice with my classmate. We were telling a Mr. Smith how proud we were to be Korean and how beautiful Korea was. But this was a country that we had very little recollection of. So Saturday school didn't really seem real to us. It didn't count towards our grades. It just seemed like a waste of time, and it moved us further away from this lifestyle that we were pursuing as Americans. Nobody else seemed to care. My teachers at my regular school didn't even know I attended Saturday school. Actually, when I even told them, they never even asked about it later on. Back in 2006, my graduate student and I actually surveyed hundreds of teachers all over California. Do you know about heritage language schools? Okay, and what do you think your role is in helping your students maintain heritage languages? And the title of our paper was, It's Not My Job. And so you can imagine what the rest of the paper kind of looked like. So then came the cultural activities. We had to pick from fan dance, taekwondo, or calligraphy. I tried them all, but none of them really spoke to me. I just wanted to be normal, like all the other kids at my regular school. I kept telling my parents, why do I have to learn Korean? I speak it so well. And of course, my yardstick were all the other Korean kids in the neighborhood who didn't speak it at all. Well, little did I know that when my family moved back to Korea when I was in middle school, my Korean was closer to a 4-year-old's than my peers. But that story is for another time. After 4 years of my constant complaining, my mysterious stomach aches sent every Saturday morning, my father finally gave in. I didn't have to go anymore. And that's the picture here. Here is when the expression says it all, when I had to go to Saturday school, and that was when I was graduating. I had the biggest grin on my face. Naively, I thought I won. But looking back, stopping my Korean language education then is one of my biggest regrets. A lost opportunity that I had to dearly pay for later in life. So here's a question that I carry with me into my work as a heritage language scholar. Why didn't my heritage language education stick? And how can we make it stick for the students that we serve now? So although we have made great strides, I still see, more than 50 years later, echoes of similar types of challenges that community-based schools face. A steep drop-off in enrollment in upper grades, curricula that don't connect with students' lived experiences, teachers doing heroic work without enough support, chronic underfunding that forces trade-offs between quality and access, and a constant societal pull towards English dominance. These are hard truths, but here's the pivot. Inside each challenge is an opportunity to innovate. However, we cannot unlock these opportunities alone. This year's conference theme says it the best. We are better together. With the right partnerships, the same pressures that strain us can become the power that sustains us. So today, I'll share a roadmap of 3 university community partnerships. I call it the service learning model, the integration model, and the research model that are working in real schools with real students and real results. The strategies in these models aren't entirely new, but combined, they're powerful, and I'll show you how they work in practice. So before we move on, and I get to the examples, I would like to introduce our university community partnership flywheel. Okay, so picture a flywheel, the image above. So like a flywheel is a heavy revolving wheel in a machine which is used to increase the machine's momentum for more power. It's hard to start, but once it's moving, it builds momentum and keeps the whole system steady. Okay? So our flywheel is going to have 4 spokes, the 4 C's, I call it. First, credibility. That is the trustworthiness of the entity, which can be established by creating advisory boards, integrating community voice, or producing research that shows impact. The second spoke, capacity, the ability to perform our obligations. This can be done by providing space for graduate and undergraduate students to do their teaching practicum hours at the Heritage School, for example, or by creating other kinds of service learning opportunities. The third spoke, continuity, which refers to the stability and reliability of the entity. We can pursue this by creating clear retention pipelines for students and volunteers so that we all know that from semester to semester, from year to year, the school will be there. And finally, capital resources, which can come in the form of grants, philanthropy, and in-kind resources that make quality possible. So the order of the spokes does not matter. You can start anywhere. The idea is turn one spoke and others begin to move. Turn all four and the system sustains itself with more energy, stability, and power, like the flywheel picture below. Okay. Now let me show you these 3 schools that are turning this flywheel. Okay. To situate the examples, all 3 schools are in Santa Barbara, California. It's in the red. A coastal city of under 100,000 people, about 100 miles northwest of Los Angeles. It is not an incredibly diverse community, but there are pockets of ethnic communities that are vibrant in their own ways. As you can see, each of the Japanese, Chinese, and Korean communities make up well under 1% of the population, so they're very small. But what is unique about this region is that it's rich in university partners. We have the Santa Barbara City College, UCSB, which is a Research One university, and some private institutions like Westmont. Within this ecosystem, there are several heritage language programs. At one time, I think I counted up to 8. But today I'm going to highlight 3. The Santa Barbara Japanese Heritage Language School, the Santa Barbara Chinese School, and the Santa Barbara Korean School. So let's start with the Santa Barbara Japanese Heritage Language School. I call their model the service learning model. The school had begun to see a pattern that many community-based programs recognize. By the upper grades, students were thinning out. Some students no longer felt that the Japanese studies connected to their daily lives. Relationships with the instructors felt more formal than personal. Motivation dropped. Rather than accept this drift, the school chose to re-engage students by giving them meaningful roles, visible milestones, and clear payoffs for their effort. They started with a simple idea that they call Teach Forward. So older students could fulfill the 60 hours of community service required by their local high schools for graduate by returning to the Heritage Language School to serve as teaching assistants. But however, before stepping into the classroom, these students attend a couple of training sessions where they cover small group instruction, peer support strategies, and classroom presence protocols. To honor that preparation, the school offers a micro-credential, something students could write on their resumes and college applications. The message is clear. You are not just helping out, you are developing real instructional skills. The tone of the program shifted. Older students were no longer drifting away. They were returning as teaching assistants, visible to the younger students as mentors who know their names and cheer their progress. And the younger students saw that if they continue with the program, that they will step into the role of a teaching assistant. Later, which gave them the motivation to continue. Because credentials matter for young adults, the school also created an AP Japanese language and culture exam pathway. Students received monthly practice tests and targeted coaching for the exam with a clear goal of scores of 3 or higher. For many, that score opened practical doors, satisfying college language requirements or freeing space in their schedules to study another language or take another more advanced course. So the AP track didn't replace community values. It translated them into outcomes that counselors, parents, and students immediately recognized. The effects were noticeable. Retention in the upper grades rose, and a majority of students achieved 3+ on their AP exam. Just as important, the school culture changed. Teaching assistants formed stable mentoring relationships with younger students, answering questions, modeling study habits, offering the kind of social support that keeps youth engaged. Teachers reported that classes felt more connected and that instructional time went further with TA support in the room. The school's next step is to work with the local school district and university or higher education partners on dual enrollment and credit by articulation pathways. By aligning learning outcomes and assessments so that community-based heritage language classes can count for high school graduation and, where appropriate, college credit, the incentive to stay becomes stronger. That is, when learning counts in the systems that shape students' choices, students want to stay. As you can see, the Santa Barbara Japanese Heritage Language Schools approach weaves credibility, capacity, continuity, and capital into one flywheel. Public recognition through community service hours, people power through graduate volunteers, retention pipelines that start early and grow into mentorship, and tangible credentials that attract resources and interest. None of these strategies alone are sufficient, but taken together have given the program momentum, and they have reminded all students, young and old, that their language has a place in the future. Next, the Santa Barbara Chinese School. I call this model the institutional integration model. So the Santa Barbara Chinese School was also confronting a set of constraints that sound familiar. Space was tight. Qualified teachers were hard to find. Funding was limited and enrollment needed to grow. Rather than treat each issue separately, the school chose a single integrative strategy: become a part of the local educational ecosystem, so that people, places, and resources could move more easily toward the program. They began by cultivating faculty champions at UCSB. 3 professors, 1 in linguistics, 1 in education, and 1 in East Asian studies, joined the advisory board and lent their credibility to the school. With those relationships in place, weekend classes gained access to UCSB classrooms and multimedia resources, which lifted instructional quality without increasing facility costs. The same faculty helped build a teaching pipeline. Each year, 8 to 12 graduate students enroll in a Chinese pedagogy course and then teach at the community-based Heritage Language School. For their practicum, they receive a small stipend and graduate with documented experience and references. To add a second layer of support, undergraduates were recruited as teaching assistants for academic credit, giving classroom steady instructional support. Recruitment became proactive and visible. The school recruits Chinese-speaking graduate and undergraduate students from across departments and clubs, not just East Asian studies. And the pipeline stays diverse and dependable. Coursework in pedagogy equips the graduate and undergraduate students with instructional strategies and activities that they can apply the very next weekend. Moreover, for this school, the integration extended beyond the university. In partnership with the Santa Barbara School District, the school launched Santa Barbara's first Mandarin immersion after-school classes at 4 elementary schools. Using parent volunteers, graduate, undergraduate students as instructors, those classes introduced Chinese to a broad range of families and now feed about 30 additional students into their weekend heritage language school. After multiple trial programs and school board presentations that paired student performance with parent testimonials, they were able to establish a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, with the school district that helped stabilize class schedules and raise the school's profile. Again, the effects are reinforcing. With university partners, the school's credibility increased. With graduate and undergraduate assistants, their capacity grew. With after-school pathways and a standing MOU, continuity improved. And as those 3 spokes started turning, capital in the form of in-kind facilities, tuition revenue, and small grants became easier to secure. What began as an isolated problem started to function like a flywheel. Hard to start, but easier to keep in motion. Looking ahead, another idea for this school is that they may want to explore a technology partnership, for example, with maybe the computer science department or a student coding developing club, so that they can co-build apps for teachers or students, for example, like to keep track of attendance or to keep track of progress, proficiency progress, or to offer micro lessons or language practice. The teachers and students at the schools can become user testers, meaning real users to assess the apps and provide critical feedback. With clear IP and privacy terms, such tools could add capacity, demonstrate impact, and even generate revenue for the school if they go to scale. In short, Santa Barbara's Chinese school uses the same four strands: credibility, capacity, continuity, and capital to create momentum. Together, they have made the school less extra and more essential and integrated, which makes it harder to cut, easier to fund, and better positioned to welcome the next generation of families. Finally, the third example. This is my school, the Santa Barbara Korean School. So I call this the research-driven sustainability model. So when we launched the Santa Barbara School in 2005, I was a founding director. We were starting from scratch. Uncertain space, no funds, no guarantee we could sustain the work. As a parent of two heritage language speakers, I was desperate to find ways to support their language maintenance without having to drive an hour to the next town that had a school. So I chose a path that fit my immediate accessible resources and constraints. As a professor, a research-driven sustainability approach seemed to make the most sense. I wanted to make the school a site for authentic inquiry. By doing so, I hoped the school could build credibility, attract partners, and generate resources. We began with what we had. A local Korean church opened its doors, giving us classrooms and a community anchor. From there, I turned the school into a research site. With IRB approval and privacy protocols in place, I applied for research grants and invited MA and PhD students to study heritage language development, classroom practices, and family language use patterns at our school. Graduate researchers gained authentic data and long-term placements for their research and teaching, while the school gained skilled hands, fresh ideas, and evidence we can act on. We didn't approach the partnership as research on the school, but rather it was research with the school. Our challenges became our research questions, and the students' experiences became research data. We built a community-based participatory research model in which parents and students at times served as co-researchers, keeping language use diaries for us, interviewing relatives, and discussing research findings with us. The community retained ownership of all data, and the university partners received access only for approved projects by the community. The stance built trust and kept the work grounded. We also integrated our cultural activities into the broader life of the town. Instead of isolating our heritage to weekends, we brought our students into existing festivals like the Old Spanish Days, AKA known as the annual Fiesta Parade, where we performed Korean fan dance and drumming in the town's main parade to help celebrate and showcase the diverse heritages that were represented in Santa Barbara. The community loved it, and they welcomed the diversity. Over time, our flywheel began to turn. Our credibility grew through research and publications and community voice. Our capacity expanded with graduate and undergraduate researchers in the classrooms. Continuity improved through multi-year commitments from families, and capital followed with grants and donations. What was hard to start became easier to sustain. Today, the school stands in its 20th year. As we look ahead, I think it is very important for all our schools to document for advocacy. We undersell the impact when we underdocument it. Each year, we should track all of our students, for example, their academic outcomes, their GPA trends, AP, IB participation, high school graduation rates, four-year matriculation rates. Research shows that students who maintain a high level of their heritage language have statistically significant higher GPAs and higher SAT scores compared to their monolingual counterparts. We should also track persistence and leadership records, such as heritage language school enrollment, student tutor hours, alumni mentors. We should also track community and economic indicators, such as available bilingual internships and jobs in town, parent civic engagement, and alumni career pathways. Again, we have academic data that shows multilinguals have higher earning potential. We want to show how our heritage language schools contributed to that. When you have numbers and you have narrative power and policy leverage. For us, research partnerships converted credibility into capacity, continuity, and capital, giving the program momentum to last and clear evidence of why it matters. So today, here's your call to action. Okay. I want us to start thinking about how to build strategic university community partnerships, if you don't have one already. Okay. So here are some concrete actions you can take starting next week. Okay. Step 1, okay, research and relationship building. Okay. Map the universities within 100 miles of your school. If none, connect with a sister program or school that has one. Identify potentially relevant departments or faculty research areas. Okay. The usual suspects in education, linguistics, language studies, sociology, psychology. Okay. Then send 5 short but specific emails to faculty or program coordinators inviting a conversation about a potential collaboration. Or better yet, look through your school's directory. I think you might already have these university connections through parents. The second step is partnership development. Okay. Begin documenting one piece of impact data about your students and families, something you can share. Okay. Impact data could be how long your students stay in the program, what the students' GPAs are in their weekday schools, which colleges your alumni go to. Create a 1 to 2 page partnership brief for your university context. You might be thinking, what's a partnership brief? Okay, easy. It's just a 1-page note, okay, of first, who you are, who are your students, the learners served, languages taught, strengths of the program, okay. You also want to include what you can offer, okay, whether it be as a research site, student teaching practicum placements, family engagement, access, what we as a school are looking for: space, teaching assistants, language pedagogy training, grant and research partners. Impact to date, data about your learner and alumni achievements. And then your contact information and an invitation to visit. Let them see your students in action, students learning, meet their families, feel the strengths of the community. Okay. And finally, step 3, implementation and communication. Choose one powerful story that shows how your program changed a student's life or a family's trajectory, and practice telling it. Launch one small collaborative activity with your new partner. It could be a tutoring pod, student-teacher placement, a language club, or a mini research study. Document everything. Photos with consent, hours served, outcomes. That is, what success metrics are you going to use to make sure that your partnership is viable and a success? And then apply for a small grant to support the partnership, whether from local foundations or a university internal fund. Your university partners will know how to do this. Okay, smaller grants are always easier to get, and they can serve as seed funding for larger grants. And then finally, host an information session for your families as they know what this partnership makes possible. So here's my ask. 3 commitments before you leave today or tomorrow. Okay, number 1, start 1 university partnership conversation within the next 30 days. Okay, doable. 2, begin documenting 1 form of impact data, whether it's academic, persistence, or community indicators. And 3, practice 1 powerful 90-second story about a student or family whose life changed through your program. This story is your advocacy tool. Do these 3 things, and we will have the beginnings to make the flywheel turn. Credibility from data and partnerships, capacity from people power, continuity from returning students and teachers, and capital from grants and tuition. Hard to start, yes, but once it moves, it carries the program forward. So let me close by stepping back and talking a little bit about why our work matters to our nation as a whole. For 300 years, immigrant communities have created informal educational institutions that have served not just our children, but the broader American vision. We've maintained linguistic diversity that serves national, economic, and security interests. We've preserved cultural practices that enrich American life. And we've also created pathways for integration that honor both heritage and citizenship. However, we are also modeling what education can look like when it's community-based and culturally responsive. We're showing that learning happens best when it connects to students' identities and aspirations. We're showing that partnerships between communities and higher ed institutions can benefit everyone involved. The innovations happening in your schools, the creative financing, the flexible scheduling, the intergenerational teaching, community-based research, these aren't just survival strategies. They're educational innovations that mainstream education needs to learn from. We need to be better at bragging about our accomplishments. Secondly, we need to maximize the use of the networks we already have. We don't have to build from scratch. We have amazing organizations like the National Coalition of Community-Based Heritage Language Schools and the National Heritage Language Resource Center, and other regional alliances that have already laid the groundwork for collaboration and advocacy. What we need now is to activate these existing networks for strategic partnership and development. What was really surprising to me is, as I was preparing for this talk, in our tiny little small town, Santa Barbara, the 3 schools had no idea what each other were doing. And it was such a big reminder of how easily we can become so siloed in the work that we do. It took 1 simple email to connect the 3 directors together. The Santa Barbara school has a new director now. The 3 directors together, and now, within a couple of weeks, they are working together to create joint proposals and joint activities to make a greater presence in Santa Barbara. We need to use our alliance connections to share successful university partnership models across regions. We need to coordinate our grant applications so we're not competing for the same limited pot of money. We need to leverage our collective voice to advocate for policy changes that benefit all community-based heritage language schools. The infrastructure exists. The relationships exist. What we need is a strategic coordination to move from individual school survival to collective sector transformation. And I'm sure that presentations that will be happening this weekend, you'll hear about all the concrete ideas of ways to move forward together. Finally, as we honor generations of community-based heritage language schools and the parents and community advocates like my father who sustained these schools, let's remember our work is not just to preserve, but it is to transform. The challenges in front of us are invitations to design better, to partner smarter, to advocate with courage. We should think bigger, link arms across institutions, and advocate with, and turn today's pressures into tomorrow's momentum. If we keep the flywheel turning, our students won't just maintain their languages. They'll carry them into the future with power and with pride. The momentum for incremental change steps has passed. Let's build the transformational partnerships our community-based heritage language schools deserve, starting now. Thank you. We have some time for some questions. Okay. Yes. Oh, do you want to take this? No. Oh. I gave it to Mark. Okay.
They can't hear you online unless you.
The question I have is when you started the program in Santa Barbara 20 years ago,
Yes.
at that time, how many parallel programs were running for all those languages?
At
And
that time,
And were you able to capture those?
right. I do not know, because that was when I had first gotten to Santa Barbara as an assistant professor, was settling in, and then looked at my children and looked at the community and thought, there's no way we're going to help them maintain their Korean heritage language in this city. And so I was so busy just getting my school going that I did not look around. I didn't have that kind of bandwidth. But soon after, around 2009, I started to open my eyes and I started to look, and we had in the community a Hebrew school, a Greek school, there was a French, German, and then the three Japanese, Korean, and Chinese schools. And what's interesting is as my work started getting out there, I had more graduate students applying to our program that were interested in heritage language maintenance. And so they went into the schools, into the community schools, and started helping it develop and expand. And so it became more visible. But back then, like I know the Japanese school started off in somebody's living room. And it was just like an after-school program where the community kids just got together. But now they have their own nonprofit organization, and it's more stable.
We started the programs.
Mm-hmm.
We started the programs, and then a lot of students came. But when we grew the number of students, almost every township has a Chinese school, a Korean school, a Hindi school. So I think that is a good thing because a lot of expansion in that area and a lot of forces are, bringing students up. But I think that there are more challenges now, different challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But initially, to bring them was a biggest challenge.
Right.
But now there are other challenges.
Right. And I think it would
And we'll
be,
talk about that later.
yes, yes. And I think it would be so cool for the schools in the neighboring cities to get together to host like joint activities. I rarely, because everybody's just so busy and a lot of this work is happening on volunteer hours, that to look elsewhere and to make these connections take extra effort. If your university partners are involved, I think they might have the capacity to make these connections for you.
We could take a question on, let's go back and forth between questions online and questions in the room. And Mark's monitoring questions online, and we're going to put if you don't mind, so put the
yeah.
slides down so we can see the people.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah.
When they're asking a question. Does anybody have a question or a comment online? Can they hear you? Hopefully. Oh, I don't know.
No, I can't go that way.
Can they what? Can they hear me? Oh. Thank you. I said, does anybody online have a question or a comment? Mark, are you? Who? Can you go ahead and speak? No. If you have a question, unmute and speak. Okay, well, there's one in here, so we'll give them more time to think. And Mark, somebody's trying to somebody back here, you indicated that you wanted to say.
Hi, thank you very much. It's very, very interesting. I'm a teacher at the community-based school, but at the same time, I'm a faculty member of the university. So the partnership itself is very interesting. And I'm thinking in the real life, thinking about my community school, not my community school, but whatever entity, it's not homogeneous. That means, of course, parents have their thought, students might have their thought, and teachers have their thought. Some of them are welcoming outsiders, so-called. Some people might have a little bit skeptical. University side, it's more or less the same. Like students, they would like to gain something from that experience, which does not necessarily matching what community school would be able to offer. So to solve or to deal with the kind of a situation, I suppose we need like a extensive, I don't know, interactions or discussions or something like this. So if you have some experience of that, that would be so great. And then also like, how can I say, officialize the partnership, OMU or memorandum or OMU. It's a sort of like a huge administrative procedure required. So if you have some insights on that part, that would be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent questions. You are kind of like the ideal person that we were looking for. So there were two questions, one about the administrative burden of creating these partnerships. And the second question was about, well, community schools might want something different than what university partners are seeking. The partnerships are a negotiation, okay? And so I'm not saying that it will work for every single person, but there's enough variety and enough options where you could find a good balance of what would best serve community schools and what would serve the interests of university partners. For example, families tend to be very interested in academic credit, college-going pathways. And when they hear about university partnerships, something opens up. They're interested. Okay? And so this is why I think it's so important to host these information sessions where the families get to meet university partners and vice versa to see where that mutual interest will lie. Administrative burden, you're absolutely right. However, we are at the community schools, we're doing so much already. And at the university, by having a stable research site, for example, if we're looking at the research model, it lifts such a big burden to have buy-in from a research site where you don't have to always go and wonder, oh my gosh, will my research site be there next year? But to have that kind of buy-in and cooperation and collaboration from a school, from a research site, lifts so many other burdens that they would have capacity to help you with this partnership. And so I think what's really important is transparency. This is what we have bandwidth for. This is what we need, and see what your partners can provide. And it's not just one partner. Through my interviews with the directors, we found that they started off with an East Asian studies professor, but then he brought in his colleague from education, and then she brought in somebody from linguistics. And so there are other professors at a campus that may share these research interests, and together it becomes more powerful. I hope that answered some of your concerns, but I think we can talk more about this. Yes, can we take? Okay.
Okay, so one question online. Can such collaboration be extended with the local school districts just to recognize the multi-ethnic students and their mother languages? Celebrating International Mother Language Day, IMLD, and for example.
So the question is, can the partnership happen with local school districts rather than a university.
Yeah, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely. In our experience, sometimes it helps having that university partnership in place to push into a school district, because depending on your school district, for example, Los Angeles Unified, it's incredibly difficult to get in because there's just so many requests for partnerships. Santa Barbara, it's a little bit difficult because there's such a big major university and all the professors are trying to get into the school districts to do research. We have an Goleta School District right next door. They're a bit easier. So every school district's a bit different, but absolutely it is possible. What school districts are wanting to know is, what is the impact for their students? What are they getting out of this? And is that outcome aligned with their standards, their learning goals, their objectives, right? And is the assessment process, so that's another key thing. Assessment is key. Are the ways in which you're doing your assessments aligned with what your school district acknowledges and recognizes? And if those things are in place, school districts, absolutely. I think what's important is that our community heritage language schools is not just this entity that they go to for International Day, right? Or for one celebration. It's a start, but I want our schools to have a bigger presence in school districts. And I want them to know that what our students are doing at the schools are just as academically rigorous as what they're doing in their regular schools. And I think that's very important. And in order to do that, we need to document our achievements, document the impact that we're having on our students. And then we had a question. There was a
Shorts.
Oh.
Oh, there's two more?
there was a question in the back.
Oh, okay, two questions, but let's keep it short, okay? Okay, question in the back.
So you mentioned a couple of times that it's very important to document impacts. And I'm actually wondering, since you have a very small population in Santa Barbara, right? You already said that. So my assumption is the school is also very small. And that's the same like with our schools in the Bay Area. Our German schools are very tiny schools. So our graduating classes are anywhere between like 5 and maybe 10 people. So is that a big enough data set that would be important to share? I mean, how do you create enough data to actually make your school interesting to the universities?
You have longitudinal continuity, right? So we're not just talking about impact data 1 year. We're talking about impact data over 20 years, right? When the school size is that small, usually it's the qualitative researchers that are very interested in what goes on in terms of interactions, right? Rather than like survey data. Buy-in from the parents. So even after graduation, I want to know where my graduates went, what they became, and this is all impact data. So I think it's very important that the parents at your schools today, even after their children leave the school, that they have in their hearts that service mindset where they are able to, you send out a Google survey every year to let you know how their kids are doing, right? And maybe they might just come back to volunteer at your school. But I don't think size matters. You just start, and then over time, you'll just start to build a data set. Thank you.
Thank you. Last question.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I was wondering if you explored the option of getting high school credits for your students.
At the Korean school? No.
Yes,
At the
or any of the 3 schools. Did they try that? And were there any challenges? Like what's the...
So the Japanese school is just about to embark on that, right? So so we have not had a success case yet, but they're just starting, and then the Chinese school is kind of helping them because they already have worked with the school district. However, I do believe across the nation, there are schools that have very successfully been able to achieve this high school credit. I think there's one in Virginia, but I've heard of schools that have been able to, and I'm sure there's going to be other presentations that will be able to speak to that. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your wonderful talk. Very inspiring, very guiding. Let's give another clap. And thank you for your wonderful questions also, which really got Jen Sook going more. So now we have a break, and I'm suggesting that we were supposed to go to the workshops at 2:30, but I want us to have a 15-minute break. And it turns out there's a lot of food out there, not only coffee and tea and water, but a lot of food. So if you feel like eating a